Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to Behavior Guidance Strategies in Camp Settings. I know you are probably all gearing up and getting ready for the camp season, and we're hoping to provide you with some tools and resources to help you along the way. I'm Jennifer Smith with the Wisconsin After School Network, which is a program of Marshfield Clinic Health System. So we all know that camp is a pretty exciting time, right? It's exciting for young people. It's exciting for the adults. We move out of sort of the typical routine of the school year, homework, and we move into a little bit more informal, experiential, playful environment where young people can make connections with each other, with adults, maybe connect with nature and the environment, some new activities that maybe they have not engaged with in some time or ever, depending upon their previous experience. And so we have a lot to anticipate around summer camp and when all of this gets geared up and ready to receive young people in our spaces. At the same time, this new environment can be a little stressful and anxiety provoking, right? We as humans really appreciate and enjoy predictability and routine. Our brains kind of like it when they know what's going to happen next. I often hear from adults about going someplace new and having concerns about the parking situation, right? What's it going to be like? And people getting there early because they don't really know. And that's really our brain being a little concerned about the unfamiliar. And so planning ahead to try and help us navigate, right, in a new and potentially exciting but unfamiliar environment or space. And so we need to think about that when we're thinking about all of these young people who are going to converge on us at our camp over the summer. If we're a residential camp and we have kiddos who are staying with us overnight for a period of time, if we're a day camp and we are going to have groups of kids showing up and spending full days with us multiple days out of the week, they may come to the table with a little anxiety along with their excitement. And so in an effort to really think about how do we best set the table so that kids are able to fully engage in our well thought out programming that we are going to put in place for all of these young people to have new and exciting experiences, we need to really think a little bit about prevention. So our first step in behavior guidance really should always be, how do we set the stage? How do we create an environment that is supportive, that we've taken a little bit of time to be reflective and intentional with our design of that environment so that young people can be optimally successful when they show up in our space. And so, we may all come to the table with some emotions, right? So we as the adults have a pretty hefty responsibility, right? We are responsible for the health and safety, the experience of the young people who are showing up in our summer camp. We want them to have a great experience. We also want things to go smoothly for ourselves, right? We hope that we don't have significant issues or challenges that we have to navigate. And so we are kind of bringing some of that energy to the table ourselves. And the campers can also be bringing some similar energy, feeling a little bit more anxious or unsure, maybe having some energy that they don't really know how to articulate or to navigate, but having that understanding that how we're all coming to the table can really help us be thoughtful about how we're kind of setting that stage. So many of you are probably familiar with the work of Maslow by way of the Blackfoot tribe. And so Maslow really talks about, in order for us to really have that experience of belonging, of connectedness, of friendship, we really need to have those basic needs of safety and security, our physiological needs met. And so, how does that really help us think about setting this stage when we are welcoming young people into our camp? And so, partly we can think about how are we clearly articulating that those basic physiological needs will be met while they're in our care, that we have an abundance of food, water, resources, right, available to them. They don't need to be concerned about the security of their belongings. We have a system in place that is going to help ensure that their belongings have a place and that they will be safe and secure when they are there. Um, how are we communicating autonomy and bodily safety in terms of our psychological safety, right? We really want to think about how we're setting the stage to create this warm and welcoming environment for young people as they are arriving in our space. We also want to think about engaging young people in new and diverse environments. Maybe we're going to be hiking in the woods. Maybe we're going to be or experiencing canoeing or aquatics. Maybe we're taking a field trip. And these are unfamiliar spaces and experiences for young people. And so, how do we articulate what to expect before embarking on this exciting adventure? How do we clearly identify this is what's going to happen first? You know, we're going to get on the bus and it's going to be a half an hour drive. And then when we get there, we're going to all come together and we're going to check in, right? And so we are articulating, sharing the process and the steps so that kids know what to anticipate when they arrive in this new and exciting environment so that they are not taken by surprise and ideally can have a little bit lower level of anxiety associated with this new experience and are more able to fully engage in this amazing opportunity that we are presenting them as part of our program. So, with all of those efforts, having some awareness of ourselves and what energy we're bringing to the table, recognizing that young people might bring their own levels of energy, really articulating how we are going to support young people and clearly letting them know what to expect. We are, in fact, dealing with people, right? And so things will happen. We hope that those efforts on the front end will really work to minimize the number of potential issues or challenges that arise in the context of that event or activity. And we also need to be prepared, knowing that something is likely going to arise despite our best efforts at prevention. And so it's always helpful for us to have some tools in our tool belt when those challenges come up. So the first tool is what we call the behavior guidance filter. And for me, the behavior guidance filter is really helpful because in a challenging or difficult situation, especially if we are off-site in a new and unfamiliar environment, we as adults can experience some anxiety or stress because of the unfamiliarity of the environment that we're in, navigating that new environment with a group of young people, right, might contribute to our own sense of maybe dysregulation or feeling not fully grounded like we might normally be in another environment. And the behavior guidance filter, I think, really helps give us something to focus on in a moment of maybe increasing anxiety as kind of an anchor in how do I navigate this situation with a young person who is maybe exhibiting some challenges that will help me as the adult to be more grounded in that moment, um, and really focus on helping myself to be an anchor for that young person as we kind of walk through the steps. The other piece is it really helps me to kind of stay in my thinking brain because I have to keep track of this filter in my brain as I'm walking through the steps, which also really helps me to stay grounded and keeps me kind of out of that stressful, emotional survival brain, right? But really kind of keeps me a little more grounded in this thinking brain. And so it's really a very kind of simple 5-step process that we can use in the moment when we are navigating a challenging situation. So the first one is, am I regulated? And if I am struggling myself in the moment, I might be challenged to be effective in engaging with this young person who is also having some challenges in the moment. And so either I need to take a beat and take a breath and, make an effort to better regulate myself, or tag team if that is an option or a possibility with another adult who is in the environment with me, who could maybe stand in, even if only to supervise um, this young person while you collect yourself. If they're not really in a space to help with the process, maybe they can just give you a moment so that you can collect yourself and come back. But that's always going to be our first step, is checking in with ourselves. Am I regulated? The second step is helping the young person to really identify or name and validate an emotion and really tie it to something that's going on in the environment. One of the powerful things about naming an emotion is it helps move that emotion from this lower survival brain up to our thinking brain. And if you label an emotion for a young person, it does the same in their brain, which really kind of helps them to move back into this thinking space. So, I see you are really feeling frustrated because your time is up in the pool and you were really enjoying yourself. And it can be really hard to stop doing something that you are really enjoying, right? You're just naming what you're observing, tying it to the feelings that you think are coming up for that young person, right? And then really kind of giving them an explanation. Feelings are morally neutral. They're not good, they're bad, they're sensations that come up in our body in response to something that's happening in our environment. And so we're just going to name it. I see you really feeling sad because it's not your turn to play this game yet. And it looks really fun. And you're kind of getting tired of waiting. And so I get that. Sometimes it's hard to be patient. You're really just clearly articulating what you're observing in the moment. And then helping the child to regulate. So if the child is angry or sad, really, expressing some emotions, being a little bit more emotive in that time and space, helping them to regulate is going to be the next important step. Trying to have a conversation about the expectations or what we're doing or why we're doing it when a young person is venting or crying is really an ineffective strategy. The child is not going to be in a space to receive any of that information. And so saying something like, sometimes when I get frustrated, I just take a couple deep breaths. You want to take a couple deep breaths with me? And then model and mirror that practice with the young person. Or, maybe I stand up and I stretch. Or if we're outside, maybe I listen to see how many birds I can hear right now, right? So we're really going to kind of ground in the senses, help the young person to regulate. And then we can offer some choices. And the idea with offering choices is that what we are offering are options that we are okay with, right? So we're not going to offer um, an option that we are okay with and one that we hope they don't choose. We're only going to offer things that are acceptable to us as options. So, you're really frustrated waiting your turn. You're having a hard time being patient. Here's a couple options. Maybe you can walk to the fence line and back so that you're moving your body while you're waiting and you don't just have to sit, because sometimes it's hard to just sit and wait. Um, or you can talk to your friend about the plan for tomorrow or what we're having for snack. Give them a topic, but you're giving them some options on how to navigate the frustration that they're feeling, being impatient, waiting for their turn at something that they're excited about. So we're going to give them a couple different ways to get where we want them to go. And then the last step is having a logical consequence in mind. So if the situation, we're unable to resolve it, we continue to kind of process and problem solve and give some choices, and the young person is unable to regroup and rejoin the activity, having a consequence that is in proportion with the situation. So if it's a small infraction, then the consequence should also be small, right? It should be proportionate to what we have observed, and it should be related. So it should be logical. Thinking about what would make sense in this situation or in this environment. So how can we come up with a consequence that will be related to what we're seeing? Maybe waiting in line is the issue and the child, starts running out of line. Then maybe we have to rethink how that child engages in activities where waiting is part of the expectation. And so maybe the consequence is that, we're going to temporarily forego some of these opportunities that require waiting, and we'll have some alternate activities in place of that. And maybe we can practice with smaller increments of time. Can we practice being patient for, a minute or 2 minutes? Or can we come up with some strategies of things to do while we're waiting to help us better manage in that moment, knowing that this is really difficult? So kind of thinking about how that connects back to the initial issue or incident that we addressed. So the framework is really a process, right, for you to keep in mind and to walk through as you are engaging with a young person who might be struggling in the moment. Another strategy that I find particularly helpful, and especially if we're thinking about slightly older, kind of middle childhood, developmental stages, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, this idea of collaborative problem solving, where young people in those developmental stages are really looking for some additional responsibility and autonomy and some influence over their environment. And so this process of collaborative problem solving really gives the young person a space to share their perspective and then be brought in to process and problem solve how to navigate the challenging situation. And so some of the language that I like to use around this, the first step is really listening to the problem. And usually what I say is, I bet there's a really good reason that you're, poking your neighbors while you're waiting in line to play in the gaga ball pit. And then you give space for that young person to kind of share their perspective. And maybe they'll say, I'm sick of waiting and this is really boring. And it's hard for me to just be standing here while it's not yet my turn and people aren't getting out very fast, right? And they may articulate this whole scenario to you about what is going on. And you're really just giving them the space to be able to do that. And then your part is to say, I hear that. It is hard to wait sometimes. And it can be really frustrating when it seems like the games are going really long and you are just excited about getting your turn. And you know what? I'm here to make sure that everybody is safe and has their turn. That's part of my job. And so, poking your neighbors while you're waiting in line because you're frustrated is not safe for your neighbors. That is not really respecting their personal space. And so, how can we think about navigating this situation a little bit differently? Because your feelings are your feelings, and there's got to be better ways to help you manage your frustration and boredom in having to wait. And then you brainstorm and process what are some options? What can we do while you're sitting and waiting? Maybe we can have the line engage in a game of I Spy so that there's a secondary activity happening rather than having kids standing and waiting, which we know is a potential problem waiting to happen when kids are standing around waiting, right? So maybe we have a secondary activity that is in the moment. We can play I Spy and kind of redirect attentions until the line is ready to move and the next person gets to engage. Or maybe there are some other strategies that the child comes up with or that we come up with that we can implement in the moment. And so it's this idea that we're going to kind of come together and recognize that this is not going the way we would like it to go. It's not in the best interest of everybody involved. And so we're going to think about how to do this better. Right. And it's not a judgment or you're being a problem. It's like, hey, I bet there's a good reason that you're poking your neighbor right now while you're waiting in line. And usually there will be some sort of reason, even if it maybe isn't the most logical or founded reason, but it gives us a starting point to have that conversation about what might be going on for that young person who maybe doesn't have the skills yet to navigate those feelings or emotions. And so we're going to help them think about that, think through that and process, and then implement some strategy that we come up with together to better navigate that environment. So when we think about the most effective ways for guiding behavior, they're really always founded in relationship. So with the behavior guidance filter, it is really kind of this supportive process that I'm thinking about as an adult, but I am validating what the young person is feeling, helping them to regulate, offering them choices, right? There is a lot of connection happening in the context of that tool. And similarly with collaborative problem solving, right? I am recognizing, what is happening right now is not what I would like to see happening right now. And I bet there's a reason that it's happening. Can you tell me why you're engaging in whatever it is that you're engaging in? And then we'll talk about and try and problem solve what that is. What is really the underlying reason of what's going on here? The behavior is sort of the manifestation of what is happening. How do we figure that out together, right? And that is also relationship building. So our foundation of safety and security that we talked about with Maslow is really anchored in having that connection with a positive, supportive adult. And so we need to be very discerning in how we are navigating these challenges and ensuring that we are doing it in a way that is really supportive of the young person and building connection rather than tearing that connection down. So we often talk about the importance and the power of relationships. And sometimes I think, we really understand it when we talk about infants and toddlers and that idea of the baby cooing at the caregiver and the caregiver cooing back at the baby and that whole interaction and how that baby is learning as a result of that interaction and that experience. And that whole idea of what we call serve and return, right? When we're thinking about infants. And I think sometimes we forget that that continues throughout our lifespan, that we learn in relationship. And that I, as a young person who is struggling in a particular environment, is going to be most successful when someone comes alongside me and helps me in that process and maybe gives me some tools or models some strategies and encourages me to practice those strategies along with them, right? That is that whole serve and return that we see with babies as kids move through their developmental stages. And even as adults, we engage in learning with other human beings, right? With experiences and interactions that we have with other people. And those are the spaces where we practice some of the things that we've learned, right? When we have a difficult situation that we are a part of, we practice some of the skills that we learned by, the podcast we watched, or the YouTube video that we saw, or the book that we read. And I'm going to try and do this differently because I have this tool and I'm going to practice it, right? And that is exactly what we're doing. And that is exactly what young people are doing in the context of our environments. And so really camp is this exciting, amazing opportunity for kids to have new experiences, engage with new adults and with each other in new and exciting ways, and for them to learn and build and grow skill through those interactions in the context of that environment. It's kind of an amazing space, right? The work that you guys are all doing is incredibly powerful and impactful for young people. So if you have any questions regarding any of this content, you can email me or visit the Wisconsin After School Network website. Thank you.